We're running out of time, and there's still a long list. So maybe what I will do from now on is to call on 3 persons at a time, and the Prime Minister could give a composite reply to 3 of them. Is it all right?
I will try.
Because I believe in inclusive governance. So first, Mr. Michael Rouse.
A report by Booz Allen in 2007 estimated that the 20-year investment needs in water were about $23 trillion US. But most of that was actually in water distribution, particularly in refurbishing the old system. And, I mean, that's absolutely huge in terms of solving the problems. There's no point in producing more water unless you can distribute it. Mm-hmm. Where do you think the experience of Singapore would help people get their minds around this huge problem?
We are doing a study at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy on the Singapore water story. And based on our analysis, I think if you look at the technological developments that are likely going to take place in the next 20 to 25 years, and Singapore's dynamic governance, water pricing, etc., our view is you would not need the treaty to go till 2061. I'll be very surprised if by 2035 you don't come to the self-sufficiency stage rather than 2061. That's just a comment.
Your question, please.
And the question is, during our analysis on Singapore water story, we understand you are the prime mover who made this water pricing, marginal water pricing in Singapore. So when you thought about this, the government of Singapore decided on marginal water pricing. Mm-hmm. Did you run into some problem with your colleagues thinking that this won't be good, or they had some reservations? And if so, how did you overcome that reservation, if any?
I want to ask you a little bit about the integrated approach to water, and how our various ministries work together, in particular the one on public housing, and how our HDB flats actually contribute to securing and closing the water loop. Thank you, sir.
Well, first of all, on reticulation, you're absolutely right. In many water systems, 40% of the water disappears in the reticulation system. So if you can just clean up plug the holes in the pipe, some of which are man-made, that's much better than producing more water, and probably the cheapest way to get more water to consumers. Mm-hmm. We've got our leakage and losses down to about 12%. The PUB tell us that that's the absolute bare minimum, but we keep on trying to squeeze them lower. On our water treaty with Malaysia, it runs until 2061. You've made a calculation to say maybe we can be self-sufficient earlier. But the water treaty is not just a matter of self-sufficiency. It's an inviolate founding document of our republic. When we became independent, one of the terms of the independence was that both governments, the Malaysians and the Singaporean government, guaranteed that Johor will supply water to us until 2061. And that absolutely cannot be changed. And I think we have to stick by that until 2061. We moved our water pricing back. This was back in 1997, and we went, as I explained, from maybe about 50 cents per cubic meter to where we are now, which is 3 times that. And there was concern how people will accept this. But I think one reason people accepted this was because at that time, regularly, there were reminders from various quarters in neighboring countries that if we were not compliant, they would threaten to turn our water off. And therefore, Singaporeans could see this and could understand that this was a national security issue, and understood the importance of becoming more self-sufficient, and could see how pricing it properly would help us to become more self-sufficient. So I don't know that you can replicate that solution in other countries. And we have very good relations with our neighbors, but at that time that was a backdrop, and for the purposes of educating Singaporeans, it was not unhelpful. As for housing board, well, all our housing board flats are sewered up and part of the closed loop. I think our problem there is not the technical part, but the people part of getting Singaporeans not to litter, not to dirty the environment. Because wherever you live in Singapore, the chances are you're living in a catchment area. And if you drop a sweet cover or some cigarette butt on the floor, and if you follow it when the rain comes and it goes into the canal, the drain and the canal, eventually it will reach the Marina Bay and spoil your view at the Marina Barrage. And that means it's additional expense in cleaning up the water and making it potable. And we have to continue to educate people to keep the environment clean so that the human beings and the water catchment can coexist.
The progress that Singapore has made in water and used water is really admirable. But what I'm thinking is that many Asian and third world countries, when they look at this, they may not find this to be appropriate. So would Singapore consider helping these struggling countries in developing appropriate technologies for their own context and their own countries, which will be most suitable for them? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think one of the things we'd like to stimulate in Singapore based on what we have done is the water industry. Because our solutions in Singapore are specific to our circumstances, but if we can develop technology, the techniques, then they can be applied, adapted to different countries and different circumstances, and it may be of more general use. And that's one of the reasons why we've got the Singapore International Water Week, to bring all the professionals together, to exchange views, and to help to understand what the demand is and what the industry is able to develop, to offer, and how the industry can do better. In China, of course, the situation is very different. I mean, in a city, 5 million people, everybody consumes water out of the tap. Everybody has a water meter, and water meters are read regularly, and you are billed. You cannot do that easily in a country which is 1.3 billion people and covering a subcontinent, or covering a subcontinent in India or in China. And you have to have different approaches to governance, to sensible use, to public education. So it's a much more complicated problem overall for the big countries. But then you have much more resources than Singapore. You have rivers, you have glaciers. If you don't let them disappear with climate warming, you can divert them, you can do hydro plants. We can't do that. So it's a bigger challenge, but you have more resources, and I have no doubt that if the countries which can develop 7, 8, 9% growth a year will be able to muster the resources to invest in water and many other infrastructures, and to bring their people's standard of living up step by step, year by year. Because that's what growth is about. It's not just incomes, it's not just dollars, but it's quality of life and the standard of living of the society and the quality of the environment. And increasingly, I think, middle-class populations which are no longer starving or bereft of basic necessities, will demand these standards, and governments will respond.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, for answering all our questions. Will you please join me in thanking the Prime Minister?